Your heart races, your breath quickens. You can run, you can hide, but deep down you know that none of it matters. She'll come for you, she'll find you, and she'll have her revenge for what you did. Night fam, this is the legend of Madame Koikoi, the teacher from hell. It all began at the Hillcrest boarding school in Lagos, Nigeria, many years ago. Titi had just started her first year at her new high school, and from the start there was only one name on everyone's lips: Madame Chloe, a beautiful history teacher who was known for overstepping the line with her classes. For as long as anyone could remember, there were always stories about how brutal she was, about how viciously she punished her students for even the smallest mistakes. Bruised faces, bloodied lips, even broken fingers. There were so many cruel things this woman did to her students, and yet none of the school staff did anything to help. At night, when the students were all tucked away in the dorms, they'd hear the distinct click of her heels in the hallways and wonder just who her next victim would be the next day. Banji, the boy who Titi met on her first day and that had become her best friend, was the first one to give Madame Chloe her wicked name. Madame Koikoi, after the sound of her heels. The nickname spread like wildfire, and soon enough, every time Chloe was seen in the hallways, the students would give the signal for the others to hide. Koi, 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 koi. The ruthless teacher, of course, quickly learned about this little nickname she earned, and she was quick to exact her revenge on the one who started it. One fateful night, Banji returned to the room looking like a living corpse. His face was purple from the beating, his teeth bloodied, his fingers beaten, bruised, marked in the shape of Chloe's heels. Titi's life would change that night when she felt a surge of anger in her heart. Enough, she thought. Enough! I need to stop this. She rounded up a few of her friends, took her softball bat, and went to find Madame Chloe. She was about to give the teacher a very valuable lesson. They found her roaming the hallway, having just locked up her classroom, and like some demon, she turned and looked at them the moment they laid eyes on her. As the students appeared out of nowhere, she knew what was up. At first, the teacher began mocking all of them for being stupid, for being weak, for not being able to take so much needed punishment. There was this evil, wicked smile on her glossy red lips. She was enjoying this. You're pathetic. You're miserable. You're nothing. The teacher took a few steps forward, going straight for the beaten student with a wide smile that nearly said it'll get far worse for you. And Titi did the first thing that popped into her mind. She swung her bat hard. It connected with Chloe with a wet and satisfying thunk. And as the woman collapsed onto the ground, trying to understand just what happened, Titi swung again and again and again and again and again and again. Her friends joined in, even Benji, punching, kicking, scratching. All this pent-up fear, all this bottled-up anger from years of abuse were suddenly let loose, and they kept beating until the only way you could recognize Madame Chloe were the red heels on her feet. Then the 5 teens, realizing what they'd just done, quickly cleaned up and buried the mangled body deep in the woods behind the school. For the first time in a while, the students in the school slept peacefully, undisturbed by the clicks of those damned heels. There was no remorse or guilt for ending the life of that monster. But what happened next could only be the reason for this story being being a legend that is still remembered in Nigeria. In the following days, the hallways of the school were swarming with police. And there are many questions. Not only was Madame Chloe missing, just a few days later, 3 out of 5 students that stood up to her that night went missing without a trace too. The only ones left were Benji and Titi. Where were the others? Did they run, with the guilt finally catching up to them? Were they scared of the police, finding out what they did? Or did something else happen? Well, they were about to find out. 7 nights later, as the two were huddled up in their room and trying to figure out what to do next, they heard the one sound they hope never to hear again. Click, 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 coil, coil, coil. And then it stopped just outside of the room. In the gap between the doors and the floor, they could spot the shiny red tips of heel. All of a sudden, the door bursts from their hinges, flying across the room and sending bits of wood and debris everywhere. Titi and Benji blown back from the impact and still rubbing the dust from their eyes until they could make out a horrible sight. A thing, a monster that was once Madame Chloe. Her legs twisted and broken, dragging across the floor. Her limbs awkwardly stitched back together and her head tilted to the side, barely holding onto her neck. Her face was a mess of bruised flesh, blood and stitches, and her eyes were a violent, piercing red. In her hand she carried the same bloody bat Titi had used just a few days ago, and this monster still had that horrible, evil smile across her lips. With dizzying speed and violence, she rushed at the 2 shocked teens. Madame Koi Koi swung at Benji once, twice, 3 times until there was no more need to swing again, ever again. He was gone forever. Then the monster turned her wicked eyes towards Titi. She slashed her across the face, pushed her to the ground, and then kept beating. Bones broke, skin bruised, teeth cracked. Barely being able to see from her now swollen eyes, Titi felt the pressure of a heel pressing against her throat.
Please, no! Please! Please, no!
Titi screamed through her bruised lip, seeing as Koi Koi raised her bat for one final swing. The girl closed her eyes, waiting for that painful final blow, but it never came. When she opened her eyes again, Madame Koi Koi was gone. She vanished as quickly as she came. Once she was rushed to the hospital and asked to try and explain what happened to her and Benji. Titi could say just one thing, the only words that she could say for the rest of her life. From then on, the rumors about Madame Koi Koi spread to every single school in Nigeria. Kids everywhere learned the story of Titi and Benji and the monster they created. They learned of the name and it burned into their memory. Now, many, when they hear the click of heels in the deep hours of the night, all they can do is to pray that this legend is truly just a made-up legend, or else